Hello friends, welcome to my channel. Today's story is about a quiet, complicated journey of self-discovery. It's about how an unexpected connection with a brother-in-law turns into a whirlwind of emotions, blurred boundaries, and hidden desires. As life feels like it's slipping away, these unspoken moments may be the key to unlocking something deeper, yet something that comes with its own set of challenges. Stay tuned as we dive into the unexpected complexities of human connection. The story is titled, The Tension Between My Brother-in-Law and Me. My name is Ethan. I'm 33 years old and work as a software developer. My life has always been about solving problems, designing systems that work seamlessly, that connect people. But lately, I felt like I'm stuck in a loop. My marriage to Clara, a compassionate and dedicated doctor, seemed to be drifting. We were both consumed by our demanding jobs, constantly racing against time. The space we once shared was growing smaller, and we found ourselves in a quiet routine. Something was missing, though neither of us spoke it aloud. Then, Lucas came to stay with us. Lucas is Clara's younger brother, 29 years old. He's a photographer, full of life and constantly chasing new experiences. He had just moved from San Francisco to New York, seeking a fresh start. Clara offered him a place to stay while he figured things out. At first, I didn't think much of it, just a temporary guest. But Lucas carried something with him, something I wasn't expecting. It was a rainy night when things began to shift. Clara had just returned from a long shift at the clinic and, exhausted, headed to bed early. I found myself in the living room alone with Lucas. He was sitting on the couch, barefoot, with a glass of wine in his hand. The soft glow from the corner lamp highlighted the shadows of the room. The rain outside created a rhythmic backdrop, a constant pattering against the roof. "Are you okay, Ethan?" Lucas asked, looking up at me with a playful yet knowing smile. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I was. There was something about the way he asked that made me feel vulnerable in a way I wasn't used to. He raised his glass. "You know," he continued, "you should relax more. You look like you could use it." It wasn't a suggestion I was used to hearing. I hadn't realized how tightly wound I had become until that moment. I sat down beside him, took the glass of wine he offered, and we both fell into an easy silence. The moment was comfortable, but also unfamiliar, like two people trying to figure out something unspoken between them. We started talking about simple things at first, life in San Francisco, the usual small talk. But then Lucas asked a question that took me by surprise. "Do you ever think about why you became a software engineer?" he asked, his voice casual, but his eyes locked onto mine in a way that felt like he could see more than I wanted him to. I chuckled nervously, unsure how to answer. I've always loved creating things virtually, but lately, it's felt like a job rather than a passion. Lucas tilted his head, listening carefully. "I get that," he said. "It's easy to lose passion when everything just becomes about deadlines and getting through the day. Maybe you just need something new, something different." I wasn't sure what he meant by that, but his words hit me deeper than I expected. It wasn't just about my work anymore. Something inside me stirred, a realization that maybe I had been letting life slip by without truly living it. We talked for a while longer, but the conversation kept coming back to the same thing. The feeling of being stuck. Lucas's presence was like a breath of fresh air. He didn't seem burdened by life's routines. He was free in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. It made me wonder if I had lost my own sense of freedom somewhere along the way. That night, after more wine and some quiet conversation, Lucas said something that stayed with me. "You know," he said softly, almost as if he were speaking to himself, "it's easy to get trapped in the expectations others have for you. Sometimes it's nice to be seen for who you really are, not who they want you to be. His words felt like a crack in the surface of everything I had known, and for a brief moment, I found myself looking at him differently. I don't know why, but in that instant, I felt as though I had been seen, understood in a way I hadn't felt in years. The next few days were a blur. Clara was often working long shifts, and Lucas and I spent more time together than I had anticipated. We would cook together, have long talks over dinner, and share moments of laughter. But every time Lucas was around, I felt this strange pull toward him, a tension in the air that was hard to ignore. One evening, Lucas was preparing dinner in the kitchen. He had promised to cook one of his famous dishes, and I was eager to see what all the fuss was about. The smell of garlic and fresh herbs filled the kitchen, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a sense of excitement. Not just about the food, but about life itself. "You're making me nervous," I teased him as I watched him work, trying to keep the atmosphere light. Lucas smiled and gave me a look over his shoulder. "Don't worry, Ethan. I promise it'll be worth the wait." He was always confident, always in control of the situation. But there was something about his presence that was both comforting and unsettling. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. When he finally finished, we sat at the kitchen counter, and he handed me a spoonful of the dish. As our fingers brushed, I felt a surge of something almost electric. It wasn't the food. It was the way he looked at me, the way his eyes seemed to read me as if he understood more than I was willing to admit. "This is incredible," I said, trying to ignore the odd fluttering in my chest. "I told you," Lucas said with a grin, leaning a little closer as if the words were shared in an intimate moment. His smile lingered, and I could feel the space between us closing in a way that felt like something was about to happen. But what? I didn't know. Later, as we sat in the living room watching an old movie, the tension between us was palpable. Clara was out, and it felt as if the world outside had paused. Just Lucas and me, alone in this space, cocooned by the quiet. The occasional laughter from the movie echoed in the background, but it was muted, like we were both too aware of the silence between us. My eyes kept drifting toward Lucas, noticing every movement he made. The way he crossed his legs, the way his fingers wrapped around the rim of his glass, the way his lips pressed against the wine as he sipped. I could feel it, the heat between us, thick and unspoken. I shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether I should say something or pretend nothing was happening. But every time he glanced over at me, my chest tightened, and my stomach fluttered with a strange anticipation. There was a magnetic pull, something I hadn't felt in years, certainly not with Clara, not with anyone. And I hated myself for it. Lucas, for his part, seemed so calm, so at ease. But his eyes, those eyes, never strayed far from mine. Every time they met, it was as if they were searching for something. The connection between us felt almost too intense, too real. My heart hammered in my chest, a frantic rhythm I couldn't control. I felt like I was on the edge of a precipice, and there was nothing to do but fall. Then, without warning, Lucas leaned forward, reaching for his glass of wine. The movement was slow, deliberate, and as he did, his face came just inches from mine. For a moment, we stayed frozen, the space between us diminishing with each passing second. My breath caught in my throat. His lips were so close to mine. I could almost feel the warmth of them, the slight pressure, the pulse. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. "Ethan," he whispered, his voice low, almost a breath against my ear. "Do you ever wonder what it would feel like to stop pretending?" His words hit me like a shockwave. It wasn't just a question. It was an invitation. an unspoken challenge, a promise that both terrified and thrilled me. I couldn't answer. How could I? Everything inside me screamed to resist, to pull away from this dangerous edge, but at the same time, a voice, quiet but persistent, urged me to lean into it. What would it be like to just feel something real for once? What would it be like to let go of the rules, the guilt, the expectations? Before I could find my voice, he was closer. His hand reached out and cupped my jaw, tender yet insistent. And then, his lips, they brushed mine, soft at first, tentative, as though testing the waters, unsure of whether I would pull away. But I didn't. I didn't want to. There was no reason, no logic, no good excuse, but I didn't pull away. The kiss deepened, and with it, every wall I had built came crashing down. All of my fears, my doubts, my sense of right and wrong, they disappeared, replaced by the overwhelming sensation of being seen, of being desired, wanted, in a way that felt raw and real. His lips moved against mine with a quiet urgency, and the feeling, oh, the feeling, was nothing like I had imagined. It was electric. It was wrong. It was intoxicating. But it was also right in that moment. That moment when I didn't have to be anyone but myself. When I didn't have to wear the mask of the perfect husband, the perfect man, the perfect professional. I was just Ethan. Ethan, who was drowning in a marriage that felt like it was slipping away. Ethan, who was desperate for something more than what his life had become. I felt Lucas's hand slide to the back of my neck, pulling me closer, as if he couldn't get enough. But even as my body leaned into his touch, even as my pulse quickened and my senses sharpened, there was a part of me that screamed to stop, to pull away, to remember. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't right. But even the guilt, even the shame, didn't stop me. Because at that moment, I wasn't thinking about Clara. I wasn't thinking about anything except the way Lucas made me feel. Alive, seen, important, desirable in a way I hadn't been in years. When we finally broke apart, I gasped for air, my mind spinning, my heart racing. Lucas's breath was shallow too, his eyes dark, his expression unreadable. We didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. The silence between us was heavy, pregnant with unspoken understanding. Neither of us moved. Neither of us knew what came next. But I knew. I knew something had shifted, irreversibly. That kiss, no matter how soft, how fleeting, had changed everything. I couldn't undo it, couldn't pretend it hadn't happened. And neither could Lucas. The weight of what we had just done lingered in the air, thick with confusion and longing. And yet, even as my mind screamed at me to stop, to walk away, to call it a mistake, I couldn't ignore the way my body still hummed with his touch, the way my heart still raced at the thought of him. The moment felt like it had stolen something from me. A part of me I wasn't sure I could ever get back, and I hated myself for it. But deep down, I also knew that something inside me had woken up, something I didn't know I'd been missing. When we parted, the room felt colder, emptier, but also fuller in a way I couldn't explain. Lucas didn't say a word. He didn't need to. I could see it in his eyes. He knew exactly what I was feeling. The next morning, when I woke up, everything had changed. The weight of the night before pressed on me like an unrelenting storm. The world outside seemed quieter, as if holding its breath, waiting for me to make the next move. I sat there, on the edge of the couch, replaying everything, every touch, every breath, every second. I had crossed a line I wasn't sure how to uncross. Lucas was already up, making coffee, as if nothing had changed. He was calm. He was at ease. but I couldn't shake the feeling that the air between us had thickened, that something had irrevocably shifted. I wasn't sure if I was ready for what came next, or if I ever would be. "Morning," he said, his tone easy, unaffected by the night's events. He handed me a cup of coffee, his eyes meeting mine with no hint of hesitation. I stared at him, the words stuck in my throat. The guilt clawed at me, suffocating me. But there was something else there too. A desire, a yearning. "Whatever happens, happens," Lucas said, his voice soft. He gave me that knowing smile, the one that felt like a promise and a question all in one. "But you're not alone in this, Ethan." And in that moment, I realized that I wasn't. Not anymore.